Good morning, it's Beth from Ruth Stitchery and ruthstitchery.com, and today we just wanted to do a quick little video on nesting your seams, a little bit about pinning, and this is just another video in kind of our series of how to make you the most successful when you're piecing your blocks. So we've done our cutting video, we've done our 1/4 inch seam video, we've done a video on pressing our seams to get them as flat as possible. And so this is just another little one about nesting seams. And so for those beginners out there that don't know what I'm talking about, when I say nesting seams, it is when you can line up your seam allowances when you are sewing two pieces together, so that when you sew that seam, it lies as flat as possible. So your seams will be going in opposite directions. So most designers with new patterns these days, they will give you that direction in writing. They'll say press toward this fabric. A lot of designers will put arrows showing you which direction to press. I kind of like when I'm writing a pattern to do both, where I have it in words, but I also have that visual of the arrow. And the whole reason that they're doing that is really to set you up for success, so that your seams are going in the appropriate direction so that you can nest your seams as much as possible. And so I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So these two were sewn together, just two pieces sewn together. And I know that when I go to sew these, that I'm going to sew them together like this, so that that is my block. So I know these two seams here need to be going in opposite directions. So if I know that the green and the blue are going to be opposite of each other, I am going to make sure that when I press this piece, that I press that seam toward this green fabric. So you can see I have already done that. It's going toward the green. And then knowing it's going to get sewn to this piece and that seam is going to line up, then I need to make sure that this piece that I press toward that blue. So that, and I've already done that, it's going toward the blue. So now I am ready to sew these two pieces together, and I know it goes against everything you kind of think about. Is you think you want to line up this edge here before you sew, but that is not what I want you to line up. I want you to line up where these seams are going to interlock. So I usually sort of place them together here, and you can see here's this seam, here is this seam. I'm going to kind of lay them together, get my tops even, and then I'm going to slide this piece over until basically it locks into place there. So it'll hit like a resistance, because the two seams are going to hit each other. So you can kind of see now, if I pull this back, those seams are right on top of each other or right next to each other. They're butting up against each other. And that is what I call nesting. That's what is called nesting. And so if you hear that term, that's what they're talking about. So once I've got that lined up, I am going to take a pin, and I'm going to stick this pin not right where that seam is. So that's another thing, that it seems like that's the obvious place to put your pin. And I'll talk about why not to do that. But I usually place this pin just under the seam and then kind of at a diagonal so that it goes through. I'm all the way through both pieces, and you can see that when I say I'm just under, I know I'm going to be putting this side into my sewing machine. So I am just under that seam allowance right there, and I'm at kind of a diagonal edge. And that way I can sew right to that seam without hitting that pin. If it was above, I might have to pull that pin out. So I'm kind of at a diagonal here. Okay, so now I can kind of maneuver this. If my top is not lined up, I can kind of maneuver that a little bit and so that it is straight. And I can do a little stretch if need be to lay that seam flat. Now the reason that I want to put this side into the machine first and not the opposite is I want to make sure that the seam that is actually coming toward me, which you can see that it's that way here, that seam that's coming toward me is going to be where I can't see it. It's my feed dogs are underneath there, and it's going to take it through. If I sew with a seam that's going away from me, it is likely that it's going to get caught on something underneath and it's going to flip. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. So I always want that seam that's going away from me on top so that I can make sure it doesn't flip, and the seam that is coming toward me is on the bottom. Okay, so I showed you that I like to pin like this. This is one of my favorite pins from Magic Pins. There's, of course, lots of different sizes, lots of different diameters of pin. I like the extra fine because they're skinny, and if I happen to not pull it out in time, that pin is skinny enough that hopefully I'm not going to break my needle. But I do know that some people really like using fork pins, which look like this, which have basically 2 pins attached where you can go in, and you can use these for any regular pinning, but I know that some people like to use these and they stick them in on either side of that seam allowance, and that's what makes them most successful. So having said that, I just wanted to reiterate that when I do these videos and I give these tips and tricks, I'm really kind of showing you things I've learned over the years that I have found work for me. And I want you to be your most successful quilting self. And so I do encourage you to get some tips and tricks from lots of people and try them all out and find the one that makes you the most successful. So I always share what makes me most successful, but of course, in almost everything in quilting, there's multiple ways to do things, and you just have to find which one works for you. So having said what I have said up to this point about pinning and making sure that you put it in, I do want to show you that when you don't put the seams into your machine properly, you are going to end up with, where did it go? Uh-oh. I've lost it.
It's right here.
Thank you. It's right in front of me. So right here you can see that that seam is now sort of twisted, and that is because right here when I was stitching this, I obviously stitched with that seam on the bottom, and when I stitched that, it flipped, and so I should have made sure that this was on top, and that way it would not have flipped like that. But I did this a long time ago. It's staying. I'm not going to take it out. But had I noticed it right away, I would have taken it out and flattened that and fixed it. So this is just another example of, I showed you a straight-on seam. You will also find that it is quite nice when you are sewing triangles together. So this is 2 hourglass blocks. If you can make sure that your seams are going in opposite directions, you would do the same thing I showed you here. You would line up until that's sort of locked into place. And that way, when these 2 get sewn together, it just gives you a really nice flat seam between these 2 blocks. So that is lovely. So that's when I'm sewing just sort of pieces together. These are 2 blocks from the Celebrate with Quilts book. And I just wanted to show you that when you end up sewing 2 blocks together, most of the time your designer is going to have you be pressing these blocks knowing that in the future you're going to be sewing these 2 blocks together. So I just wanted to show you the same thing, like these 2 seams here in the middle are going to line up. And so I would line those 2 seams up here before I even looked at my edges, and I would get those pinned in place, and then I would come back and do this and this. And finally, I just want to mention that when you are sewing rows together in a quilt, so you have several blocks and it's just the blocks sewn together in rows, I would highly encourage you, even if your pattern doesn't tell you to do so, is get those rows sewn together, and then make sure those seams between the blocks are going in opposite directions. So the top row, all my seams with those blocks are going to go to the left, and then in my next one they're going to go to the right. So, and you would just, again, left and then right, and that way when you sew those rows together, there's a lot of seams that need to be lined up, but and if they're not, that's okay, but especially those seams in between those blocks are going to nest together and make putting those rows together quite easy. So this is our quick video on nesting our seams, why it's important, a couple little tips and tricks to do it, but again, I encourage you, there's lots of videos out there. Find those tips and tricks, try them out, and figure out what works for you to be most successful. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to share our videos.